There are moments in life when everything feels heavy. The bills keep growing, the answers never come, the doors remain closed, and the mind becomes filled with fear and uncertainty. You pray, you wait, you hope, yet nothing seems to change. And slowly, without realizing it, worry becomes your daily habit. But what if the problem is not greater than the power within you? What if the very thing you fear today is already being solved in ways you cannot yet see? Tonight, I want you to understand something deeply. You were never created to live in fear, panic, or endless doubt. There is a divine power working behind the scenes of your life right now. Even when you cannot see movement, something is shifting. Even when circumstances appear impossible, the solution already exists in the unseen. The moment you stop feeding fear and begin trusting the unseen reality of your desire fulfilled, everything begins to change. Because the power that transforms your world does not respond to worry. It responds to belief, assumption, and inner certainty. So relax your mind, release the burden, and listen carefully. Because this message may completely change the way you face every problem in your life. Most people do not realize that their greatest battle is not with circumstances, people, money, or time. The real battle is happening silently within their own mind. Day after day, they replay the same fears, repeat the same painful stories, and emotionally react to the same unwanted conditions. Even when they pray for change, their imagination remains fixed on the problem itself. They wake up thinking about what is wrong, talk about what is missing, and fall asleep worrying about what may happen next. Without realizing it, they are feeding energy into the very reality they wish to escape. The mind was never designed to be a prison of fear. It was created to become a doorway into transformation. But the moment you continuously focus on problems, you unconsciously give them authority over your life. Whatever dominates your inner attention eventually shapes your outer experience. This is why two people can face the same situation while producing completely different outcomes. One collapses emotionally under pressure, while the other remains calm and confident despite appearances. The difference is not in the circumstance itself. The difference is in the state of mind each person chooses to occupy. When you constantly fight a problem mentally, you keep it alive within your consciousness. You analyze it repeatedly, fear it repeatedly, and emotionally relive it repeatedly. Every fearful thought becomes another seed planted into the subconscious mind. And because the subconscious accepts what is emotionally impressed upon it, life begins reflecting those fears back into your reality. This is why worry often feels endless. The more attention you give to fear, the more real and powerful it becomes. But here is the deeper truth most people never understand. You do not solve problems by fighting them mentally. You solve them by rising above the state of consciousness that created them. The moment you stop emotionally reacting to appearances, something begins to shift inside you. Peace replaces panic, confidence replaces desperation, faith replaces fear. And from that new inner position, life begins responding differently. Imagine carrying a heavy bag every single day for years. Eventually, the weight feels normal, even though it exhausts you constantly. This is what many people do mentally. They carry the weight of old failures, painful memories, fear of rejection, financial anxiety, and negative assumptions until emotional suffering becomes their identity. They no longer expect life to improve because they have become emotionally attached to struggle itself. But the moment you decide to put the burden down inwardly, you create space for something greater to enter your experience. You must understand that the outer world is not the true cause of your suffering. Your reaction to it is. Circumstances only gain power when you emotionally accept them as permanent truth. The moment you stop worshipping appearances, you begin reclaiming your creative power. What you see today may look difficult, but appearances are temporary reflections of past thinking. They are shadows, not final realities, and shadows cannot survive when a new inner light is introduced. This is why inner stillness is so powerful. The person who remains calm in the middle of uncertainty has discovered a secret the world rarely understands. They know that fear delays solutions while inner certainty accelerates them. They no longer chase peace through external control because they have found it internally first. Instead of constantly asking, "Why is this happening to me?" they begin assuming, "Everything is already working in my favor." At first, the mind may resist this shift. It may continue presenting worst case scenarios and old memories. But you must stop treating every fearful thought as truth. Thoughts only gain power when you emotionally agree with them. The moment fear appears, do not entertain it. Replace it immediately with the assumption that the solution already exists. Even if you cannot yet see evidence physically, choose to feel relief inwardly. This is not denial, it is spiritual discipline. The greatest transformations begin the moment a person stops identifying with the problem. When you constantly say, "My life is difficult," "Nothing ever works," or "I am stuck," you fuse your identity with limitation. But when you begin saying inwardly, "Everything is unfolding perfectly," the answer is already here. And "I am supported by a greater power," your consciousness starts moving into a completely different state. And life can only reflect the state you consistently occupy. You do not need to force outcomes through anxiety. You do not need to solve every detail with the logical mind. There is an intelligence greater than human reasoning already operating behind the scenes of your life. Opportunities are aligning, doors are opening, solutions are forming even now. But worry blinds you from seeing this movement because fear keeps your attention trapped in lack and limitation. So stop fighting the problem in your mind. Stop replaying the same painful stories. Stop giving emotional energy to fear-filled possibilities. Instead, become still inwardly. Assume peace before evidence appears. Trust that what you desire is already moving toward you. The moment you release the inner struggle, life begins responding to a new level of consciousness. And often, the very breakthrough you desperately searched for arrives the moment you finally stop resisting and start believing that it is already done. Most people spend their entire lives waiting for the outer world to give them permission to feel peace. They believe they will finally relax when the money arrives, when the relationship improves, when the opportunity appears, or when the problem disappears. Until then, they continue living in anxiety, fear, and emotional tension. But this way of thinking keeps them trapped in the very reality they wish to escape. The truth is, transformation does not begin when evidence appears externally. It begins the moment relief is accepted internally. The world teaches people to believe only what they can see with their physical eyes. If there is no visible proof, they assume nothing is changing. But the deeper laws of life do not operate this way. Every outer result is first created inwardly. Every visible condition begins as an invisible assumption accepted within consciousness. Long before a seed becomes a tree, unseen activity is already taking place beneath the ground. In the same way, long before your breakthrough appears physically, movement has already begun in the unseen world of mind and feeling. This is why emotional relief is so powerful. The moment you genuinely feel the peace of "it is already done," you shift into a completely different state of consciousness. Fear loosens its grip. Desperation fades. The mind stops chasing and starts trusting. And from that new state, reality begins reorganizing itself around your inner assumption. Many people unknowingly delay their desires because they constantly check for evidence. They look at current circumstances and immediately react emotionally to what they see. If nothing changes outwardly, they become discouraged. If delays appear, they assume failure. But every time they return emotionally to fear and doubt, they pull themselves back into the old state. They are trying to create a new reality while emotionally remaining loyal to the old one. You must understand something important. The outer world is always reflecting past assumptions. What you see today is not necessarily evidence of your future. It is evidence of what has previously dominated your consciousness. If you continue reacting emotionally to appearances, you keep recreating the same experiences repeatedly. But when you choose relief before evidence appears, you interrupt that cycle and begin planting the seeds of a new reality. Imagine a person who desires financial freedom but constantly feels panic about money. Even while affirming abundance, they remain emotionally connected to lack. Their dominant feeling is still fear, not fulfillment. Now imagine another person in the exact same situation who begins feeling inwardly secure before external change occurs. They walk with calmness, think from stability, and trust that everything is unfolding in their favor. Though both may currently face similar conditions, they are moving toward entirely different futures because they are living in different emotional states. Feeling relief before evidence appears does not mean pretending problems do not exist. It means refusing to let temporary appearances control your inner world. It means choosing faith over emotional reaction. It means understanding that unseen movement often happens long before physical confirmation arrives. The moment you stop demanding immediate proof, you allow the deeper creative process to unfold naturally. There is a quiet power in emotional certainty. When you truly assume something is already resolved inwardly, your entire energy changes. You stop forcing, you stop obsessing, you stop begging life to change. Instead, you begin living from the feeling that the answer already exists. This shift may appear small, but it changes everything. Life responds not merely to words, but to dominant emotional states. Your feelings communicate your assumptions more clearly than anything you say aloud. Most people unknowingly practice fear every day. They rehearse worst case scenarios, imagine rejection, anticipate disappointment, and emotionally prepare for failure. Then they wonder why life continues reflecting stress and struggle. But imagination is not meant to be used against yourself. It is meant to become the tool through which you align with the reality you desire. The moment you begin feeling the relief of fulfillment inwardly, you activate a higher creative process. This is why inner peace must come first. If you wait for the world to change before you feel calm, you remain dependent on circumstances for emotional stability. But when peace begins within, circumstances eventually conform to that inner state. The outer world has no choice but to mirror what is consistently accepted in consciousness. At first, this may feel unnatural because the mind has been conditioned to trust appearances more than imagination. Fear may whisper that nothing is happening. Doubt may try to convince you to return to anxiety. But do not surrender your inner state to temporary conditions. Stay faithful to the feeling of relief. Continue assuming the best. Continue feeling gratitude before evidence appears. The most powerful people are not those who control every circumstance. They are the ones who remain inwardly stable regardless of circumstances. They understand that emotional mastery is true power. They know that panic blocks clarity while trust opens pathways unseen by the logical mind. So tonight, stop waiting for the world to give you peace. Feel peace now. Feel relief now. Walk as though the burden has already been lifted. Sleep as though the answer is already on its way. Speak as though everything is unfolding perfectly for you. Because the moment you emotionally accept the feeling of fulfillment before physical evidence appears, You step into alignment with the reality you desire. And what is accepted inwardly long enough must eventually appear outwardly. Most people spend their lives searching for power outside themselves. They look to circumstances, other people, money, status, or luck, hoping something external will finally change their lives. They pray to a distant force while secretly believing they are powerless victims of the world around them. But the greatest truth hidden from humanity is this: the creative power they seek has always existed within them. The divine does not only exist somewhere beyond the stars, it operates through human imagination itself. Your imagination is far more than a place for random thoughts or daydreams. It is the workshop where reality is formed before it appears physically. Every invention, every achievement, every relationship, every transformation first existed as an image held in the mind. Long before something becomes visible in the outer world, it is accepted inwardly through thought, feeling, and assumption. The imagination is the bridge between the unseen and the seen. Most people underestimate this power because they have been conditioned to believe only in physical evidence. They trust what they can touch more than what they can imagine. Yet the entire direction of their lives is constantly being shaped by the pictures they repeatedly hold within themselves. A person who continually imagines failure, rejection, and disappointment unconsciously prepares their life for those experiences. Meanwhile, the person who consistently imagines peace, success, and fulfillment begins moving toward those outcomes naturally. The imagination does not merely entertain images. It impresses them upon the subconscious mind, and the subconscious works tirelessly to make those impressions real. This is why fearful thinking can become so destructive. Many people spend hours imagining worst-case scenarios without realizing they are emotionally rehearsing the very conditions they fear. They visualize loss, conflict, sickness, and limitation so often that these images become familiar states within consciousness. Then life begins reflecting those states outwardly. But the same power that creates fear can also create freedom. The moment you consciously direct your imagination toward the reality you desire, you begin activating a completely different experience of life. Instead of mentally living in problems, you begin mentally living in solutions. Instead of imagining defeat, you imagine victory. Instead of expecting rejection, you begin feeling accepted, loved, and supported inwardly. This is why imagination must be treated with reverence. It is not a meaningless mental activity. It is a sacred creative force. The images you consistently accept internally become the patterns your life eventually follows. What you dwell upon emotionally begins shaping your future experiences. Think about how often people unknowingly use imagination against themselves. Before an important event, they imagine embarrassment or failure. Before receiving news, they imagine bad outcomes. Before beginning something new, they imagine what could go wrong. They continually project fear into the future and then wonder why anxiety dominates their lives. Yet they rarely realize that imagination itself is neutral. It simply responds to the direction it is given. The divine creative power within you does not force negative outcomes upon you. It reflects the states you most consistently occupy. If you imagine life working against you, you begin perceiving reality through fear. But if you imagine yourself supported, guided, and successful, your consciousness shifts into alignment with those assumptions. This does not mean every passing thought instantly becomes reality. What shapes life most deeply are the thoughts and images accepted repeatedly with emotional conviction. The subconscious responds to feeling. Whatever feels natural and true internally eventually hardens into fact externally. This is why inner vision is more important than outer appearances. The world may temporarily show delay, limitation, or uncertainty, But you must refuse to let appearances control your imagination. The moment you emotionally surrender to visible problems, you strengthen them inwardly. But when you dare to imagine beyond current circumstances, you begin introducing a new possibility into consciousness. Many of the greatest transformations happen when a person chooses to believe inwardly before the world gives evidence. They imagine abundance while facing lack. They imagine healing while experiencing pain. They imagine success while surrounded by obstacles. And because they remain faithful to the unseen image long enough, reality eventually conforms to it. The imagination is where faith becomes living experience. It allows you to mentally enter the reality you desire before it physically appears. When you repeatedly feel the joy, peace, gratitude, or confidence of your wish fulfilled, you impress those emotions upon the deeper mind, and life begins moving in harmony with that inner state. You were never meant to use imagination as a tool for fear. You were meant to use it consciously and deliberately. Instead of replaying old failures, begin imagining new outcomes. Instead of mentally reliving pain, begin mentally experiencing fulfillment. See yourself already becoming the person you desire to be. Feel the relief of knowing it is already unfolding. Do not dismiss this as fantasy. Everything visible was once invisible. Every physical result began as an unseen idea accepted by someone internally. The future itself is shaped first in imagination before it appears in form. So guard your imagination carefully. What you repeatedly picture inwardly becomes the foundation of your outer life. If you want peace, imagine peace. If you want abundance, imagine abundance. If you want freedom, begin seeing yourself free now. Because the creative power working through your imagination is far greater than you have been taught to believe. And when you consciously align your inner vision with what you desire, life slowly but surely begins reshaping itself to match the reality you have already accepted within. One of the greatest mistakes people make is believing that their current circumstances have the final authority over their lives. They look at what is happening around them and immediately accept it as permanent truth. If money is low, they assume lack will continue. If relationships become difficult, they believe love is disappearing. If opportunities seem absent, they conclude success is impossible. Without realizing it, they begin emotionally bowing before appearances. They allow temporary conditions to decide their mood, their beliefs, and their expectations for the future. But circumstances are not masters. They are mirrors. They reflect past thoughts, past assumptions, and past emotional states. The problem is that most people treat the reflection as the source. Instead of changing inwardly, they spend all their energy reacting to what has already been produced. They fight shadows while ignoring the light creating them. The outer world is constantly changing because it is not fixed. It is the visible expression of invisible consciousness. What appears solid and permanent today can completely transform tomorrow when inner assumptions change. Yet many people remain trapped because they place more faith in what they see externally than in the creative power operating within them. This is why fear becomes so dangerous. The moment you emotionally accept a circumstance as final, you strengthen it within your consciousness. You begin repeating the story of limitation again and again. You tell yourself, nothing ever changes. This problem is too big, or life is against me. Slowly, these thoughts stop feeling like temporary reactions and begin feeling like absolute truth. And because life reflects dominant assumptions, the same patterns continue repeating. Most people do not realize how deeply they worship appearances. They wake up each morning checking circumstances before deciding how they will feel. If external conditions seem favorable, they feel hopeful. If conditions seem difficult, they immediately feel discouraged. Their peace depends entirely on what the world shows them. But true spiritual power begins the moment you stop allowing appearances to control your inner state. Think about how often people lose faith simply because they cannot yet see visible movement. They pray for change, but after a short time they return emotionally to doubt because nothing appears different outwardly. They forget that every transformation begins invisibly before it becomes visible. Just because something has not appeared physically does not mean nothing is happening. Seeds grow in darkness long before they break through the surface. The person who understands this no longer panics over temporary conditions. They understand that appearances are delayed reflections of past things thinking. Instead of reacting emotionally to the outer world, they focus on maintaining the inner state they wish to experience. They stop asking, "What do circumstances say?" and begin asking, "What am I choosing to believe inwardly?" This shift changes everything. The moment you stop worshipping circumstances, you reclaim your creative authority. You stop acting like a victim of life and begin acting like a conscious creator within it. You realize that current appearances do not determine future outcomes unless you continue emotionally agreeing with them. This does not mean denying reality or pretending problems do not exist. It means refusing to grant temporary conditions ultimate power over your mind. It means understanding that circumstances are always subject to change. What matters most is the state of consciousness you occupy while facing them. There are people who remain peaceful during financial hardship because inwardly they already feel secure. There are people who maintain confidence during uncertainty because they trust the unseen process unfolding behind the scenes. There are people who continue imagining success even while surrounded by obstacles. And often, these individuals eventually experience extraordinary transformations because they refused to emotionally surrender to appearances. Most people would rather believe the evidence of their senses than the possibilities of their imagination. But the senses only report what has already been created. Imagination introduces what can still be created. If you constantly allow visible conditions to dominate your thoughts, you imprison yourself within old realities. But when you begin imagining beyond appearances, you open the door for new experiences to emerge. Temporary circumstances are not predictions of permanent destiny. A difficult season does not define your entire life. Delay does not mean denial. Obstacles do not mean failure. The outer world is fluid, responsive, and constantly reshaping itself according to inner assumptions. This is why emotional discipline matters so deeply. When fear appears, you must refuse to let it become your identity. When problems arise, you must stop repeating them mentally as though they are permanent facts. Instead, return inwardly to the feeling that all things are unfolding in your favor. Continue assuming peace even when circumstances tempt you toward panic. The truth is, life often changes most dramatically for those who refuse to be emotionally controlled by current appearances. They understand that reality is not fixed. They know that unseen movement is constantly taking place beneath visible conditions. And because they remain inwardly faithful to the outcome they desire, the world eventually rearranges itself around their dominant assumptions. So stop worshipping circumstances. Stop giving temporary appearances permanent authority over your mind. What you see today is not the final chapter of your story. Conditions can change suddenly. Doors can open unexpectedly. Solutions can appear from directions you never imagined. But it begins the moment you decide that your inner belief is more powerful than your outer condition. Because when you stop bowing before appearances, you finally make room for a greater reality to emerge. Most people spend their lives living from questions instead of answers. Their minds are constantly trapped in uncertainty. What if it fails? When will things finally change? Why is my life still the same? These questions may appear harmless, but they keep the mind emotionally connected to doubt, fear, and limitation. Instead of mentally living in the reality they desire, people continue living in the emotional state of not having it. And because life reflects inner states, they unknowingly continue reproducing the same experiences again and again. The truth is, the mind moves in the direction of what it consistently accepts as real. If your dominant state is confusion, life reflects more confusion. If your dominant state is fear, life reflects more situations that intensify fear. But when you begin living from the answer instead of the question, something powerful changes within you. You stop emotionally chasing fulfillment and begin embodying it inwardly now. Most people believe they must wait for physical evidence before they can feel secure, confident, or grateful. But this way of thinking keeps them trapped in dependence on circumstances. They continue saying, I will feel peace when the problem disappears. Or, I will feel successful when I finally achieve my goal. Yet the deeper law of consciousness works in the opposite direction. You must first become inwardly what you desire to experience outwardly. To live from the answer means to mentally and emotionally move into the state where your desire is already fulfilled. It means thinking, feeling, and responding from the assumption that what you seek already exists. Instead of asking, will it work out? You begin assuming everything is already unfolding perfectly. Instead of wondering, how can this happen? You begin resting in the feeling that the solution already exists, even if unseen at the moment. This shift may sound simple, but it changes the entire direction of your life. The person living from the question constantly searches for external reassurance. They obsess over signs, timelines, and circumstances. Their emotional state rises and falls based on what they see around them. But the person living from the answer has found stability within. They no longer depend entirely on appearances, because they understand that reality first changes internally. Imagine someone planting a seed into the ground and then digging it up every day to check if it is growing. Their impatience would destroy the process itself. This is exactly what many people do mentally. They attempt to believe for a moment, then immediately return to doubt because physical evidence has not yet appeared. They ask endless questions, search for certainty outside themselves, and emotionally uproot the very assumptions they are trying to establish. Living from the answer requires trust. It requires the ability to remain inwardly faithful even when the outer world has not yet caught up. It means understanding that unseen movement is always taking place beneath visible reality. Just because you cannot currently see the result does not mean the process is not unfolding. The most powerful transformations often happen quietly at first. A new assumption is accepted internally. A new emotional state begins forming. Peace slowly replaces panic. Confidence replaces desperation. Gratitude begins appearing before evidence exists. And as these inner changes become natural, the outer world eventually begins reflecting them. Most people unknowingly live from lack every single day. They think from absence instead of fulfillment. They focus on what is missing rather than what is possible. Even while desiring abundance, they mentally rehearse poverty. Even while desiring love, they emotionally prepare for rejection. Even while praying for success, they secretly expect disappointment. Their dominant state contradicts the very reality they want to experience. But the moment you begin living from the answer, your relationship with life changes completely. You stop approaching the future with fear. You stop begging circumstances for validation. You stop obsessing over how things will happen. Instead, you begin carrying quiet inner certainty. You move through life with the calmness of someone who already knows everything, is working in their favor. This does not mean forcing fake positivity or denying temporary challenges. It means refusing to emotionally identify with limitation. It means choosing to dwell mentally in the reality you desire rather than the fear you wish to escape. Your attention is one of the greatest creative forces you possess. What you consistently focus on expands within your experience. When you live from the answer, your imagination becomes aligned with fulfillment rather than struggle. You begin seeing yourself already free, already successful, already peaceful, already loved. And because the subconscious mind responds to repeated emotional impressions, these states gradually become natural within you. What once felt impossible begins feeling expected. The outer world may still show delays for a time, but you no longer panic because your confidence is no longer rooted only in appearances. You understand that reality is always rearranging itself according to dominant inner assumptions. You trust that every unseen movement is leading you toward fulfillment. So stop living in endless questions. Stop asking the universe for proof before you allow yourself to believe. Stop rehearsing uncertainty as though it is your permanent identity. Instead, step into the emotional state where the answer already exists. Walk as though the door is already opening. Think as though the solution is already forming. Feel as though the burden has already been lifted. Sleep with the confidence that everything is unfolding exactly as it should. Because the moment you truly begin living from the answer, instead of the question, life begins responding to you in an entirely different way. And eventually, what was first accepted inwardly becomes the reality standing before you outwardly. As you leave this message today, remember this truth: your life does not change when circumstances change first. Your life changes when you change inwardly. The moment you stop identifying with fear and begin identifying with the solution, a new reality begins forming around you. Do not let temporary appearances control your state of mind. What you see today is not permanent. The breakthrough, the healing, the opportunity, the peace, it already exists in the unseen. Your only task is to remain faithful to the feeling that it is already done. Stop asking, what if it never works? Begin asking, what if everything is already unfolding perfectly for me? The divine power within you has never failed. It knows paths you cannot see, solutions you cannot imagine, and opportunities beyond human reasoning. So tonight, release the worry, release the fear, release the need to control every detail. Walk forward with quiet confidence. Sleep with peace in your heart. And from this moment on, carry this assumption with you everywhere. It is already solved. Because when you truly accept that inwardly, the outer world has no choice but to reflect it. Thank you for spending this time here today. If this message touched your heart, brought you peace, or helped you see your situation differently, then carry this wisdom with you daily and return to it whenever doubt appears. Remember, you are not alone, you are not powerless, and your situation is not final. Keep believing, keep assuming the best, and keep living from the feeling that your breakthrough is already here. If you enjoyed this message, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful teachings and inspiration. And most importantly, never stop trusting the unseen power working within you. Thank you for listening, and may peace, confidence, and abundance follow you wherever you go.